It's a Hallmark film about a bookshop. Let's face it, I was always going to like The Story of Us. It's actually pretty sweet. I'm not going to pretend that it's anything different to any other Hallmark rom-com, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. What's particularly interesting about this is that I found it went by really quickly. When I recount the narrative, which I'm not going to do in any great detail because I don't want to spoil it, not a lot happened, but it never felt dull. The pacing is pretty decent. It's nothing, phenomenal, but it's quite peculiar that not a lot happened and yet it went by really quickly, and I have not really anything but positive thoughts about it after the fact. This is a premise that we see several times in Hallmark films, and I'll read the description from IMDb, in fact, because this will explain it better than I can. And this says, Janie learns that her first love, Sawyer, is the architect of a development that wants to change her beloved neighborhood and threatens her bookstore. Well, that grammar was terrible, but it still explained it relatively well. Basically, Jamie owns this bookshop, and her former boyfriend, Sawyer, is now he's the architect for a company that wants to buy out these shops and, develop it into whatever, a super mall or whatever they're trying to do. And she's conflicted because old feelings begin to emerge, but he's also potentially threatening her livelihood as he's going around trying to convince everybody to vote in favour of being bought out. The whole point here is, by the end of the film, will she have agreed to this? Will nobody be bought out? Will they be back together? I'm not going to say what happens either way, but what I will say is that I genuinely had no idea which way this was going to go. Hallmark films are usually predictable, usually really predictable. But with this one, even like 20 minutes before the end, I still couldn't. I still couldn't work out what was going to happen and what the outcome would be, particularly with whatever decision Jamie had to make. Jamie is played by Maggie Lawson, Sawyer by Sam Page. And I genuinely couldn't work it out, and I liked that because it was a pleasant surprise to, when I found out what actually did happen. So the narrative, although not the most in-depth or detailed, is still pretty nice and quite comforting to watch. With regards to the romantic aspect of it, it's set around Valentine's Day. The bookshop is called the True Love Bookshop, and one of the main elements that drive the narrative forward is the presence of these Valentines, these love letters. I'm not going to go into any more detail about those, but that is something that carries the narrative forward. So it is very sweet, quite sickly sweet at times, but I enjoyed it. It was good. Is it one of my top 10 Hallmark films? I don't think it is, but it could be a strong contender because there's nothing wrong with it. It's not that predictable. It's cliche in a Hallmark film sense, but that's safe. You know what you're getting. The characters are likable. Nobody is too disgustingly antagonistic. Nobody overreacts. And people do tend to overreact in Hallmark films, but that doesn't happen here. Very well lit, very well edited, very well shot. I can't complain. The Story of Us is really enjoyable.